I ran my fingers through my long, black hair until they were caught in a knot by my shoulder. Grunting, I reached over the side of the bed and turned off my blaring alarm clock, knocking over an empty water bottle in the process. Looking at the display with bleary eyes, the clock read 5 a.m. I closed my eyes and relaxed in the warmth of my blankets just a moment longer, but I knew I couldn't stay long. I had work to do. Regretfully, I swung my legs off the side of the mattress, my feet hitting the cold ground. I didn't rush through my morning routine. I never have to. I know exactly how long it takes to do each task, and I always get them done. I wake up, I make breakfast, and prepare lunch. After putting the last of the dirty dishes in the sink, I looked over to the counter, where 2 brown paper bags and 2 plates of probably rubbery eggs sat framed by 2 pieces of slightly burnt bacon. I snatched a piece of paper off of the fridge and scribbled a note before shoving one of the bags under my arm. Taking one of the plates, a glass of water, and a bottle of pills. Carefully, I carried them all upstairs. I stopped at the door at the end of the hall. The therapist told me to never disturb my dad, to give him space until he wanted to talk, but I wanted nothing more than to throw open the door and run into his arms, for him to laugh and say, "There's my little Shelley," and promise to take us to the beach so we could see the seals. But I couldn't, and he wouldn't. I put everything I was carrying on the floor. I reread the note one last time before putting it down where he could see it. "Dad, here's your breakfast and lunch. Please don't forget to take your pills. I love you. Signed, Michelle." I looked back up to the door, wishing once again that at the very least I could hand his plate to him, before I shook off the fantasy and went back downstairs to eat my own plate. Alone. I was right. The eggs were rubbery and the bacon was slightly burnt. I took a shower and got dressed. I brushed that knot out of my hair. I grabbed my keys and backpack and I set off for school. I walked to school alone. I like to listen to audiobooks and to count cars. It keeps me from worrying about if my dad would take his pills, or go into a depressive episode, or... The image of broken plates and blood splatters crossed my mind. I shook my head and tuned back into the story I was listening to. Another car passed me and I counted 24. I looked longingly up at the library as I passed it. It was such an easy place to escape the real world, be it home or school life. But I couldn't go in now. I didn't have time. I would have to wait until after school. Then I would go to the library and get my homework done, and probably hang around until I decided I couldn't put off going home anymore, or one of the librarians told me they were closing. I was about to turn back on my path towards school, but something caught my eye. Up on the 3rd floor, there was a large window. It was big and ornate, just like all of the windows on this ancient library. But it was darker. Not like it didn't have a light on, you could see that it did. I think what sent a shiver down my spine was the silhouette that stood in the frame. It was dark. I couldn't make out any features. I squinted at it even though it wasn't any of my business. I think it was staring at me too. Just then, my audiobook started to cut out. Static overtook the words describing a candle-filled room. I tapped the player a couple of times, tearing my eyes away from the window. The voice came back, but it wasn't the same voice.
"Michelle, you like stories, don't you?"
I froze and felt a chill go down my spine again. No character with my name was introduced in the story yet. Maybe it skipped forward? I looked around to see if someone had snuck up on me, but I was alone on the sidewalk. I looked back up at the silhouette. Its head looked tilted this time, and I think I saw the flash of golden glasses. My book said nothing else after the question. There was only the lingering sound of static. My mouth suddenly felt very dry.
"Yes,"
I whispered.
"I thought so."
My book chuckled.
"I see you often in the library, yet you've never come into my room."
The silhouette turned its head so I could see its profile.
"Usually souls like yours find it on your own, but you seem like the kind of person who would prefer an invitation first.
The silhouette turned back to me.
So, dear Michelle, you are invited to my room.
My mind was flooded with questions. Who was this? How were they talking? What room? But I barely opened my mouth when I heard the faint sound of first bell echo from my school.
Go. You wouldn't want to be late. I'll answer your questions when you come visit me,
said the voice, the static growing again.
Find me where the pages must, and tomes have long collected dust. Where you've been but do not know, that is where we lost things go.
The static grew and grew. It flooded my ears until it screeched and my vision almost went white. But just as quickly, it was gone. The familiar voice of the narrator was in place again, talking about the flicker of candles. I ran to school as quickly as I could, and there was a stitch in my side by the time I got in the doors. I quickly walked to class, and the only reason I went unnoticed by my teacher was because they weren't there yet. I've always done my best in school to pay attention and ask questions when I need to, and that behavior in itself is probably the only reason I hold my B average. But today, I was silent. I stared into space, through the whiteboards. Occasionally I would bite my nails, an old nervous habit I thought I rid myself of years ago. I glimpsed my audiobook player and I pushed it deeper into my bag. I got a few worried looks from my teachers from class to class. They knew about my home situation and kept a closer eye on my behavior than other students. Said other students don't talk to me much, probably because I don't initiate too many conversations, and I was okay with that. But today I wanted someone to talk to, someone to help distract me from the thought of that silhouette. How did they know my name? Well, they did say they saw me in the library. How did they talk through my audiobook, though? Something like that couldn't have been pre-recorded, could it? Of course I could have checked the tape itself, but I was afraid of putting the headphones back on. What's their room? I've been in every public area of the library. Maybe it's an office? And the riddle at the end. I decided I wouldn't worry about it, and I wouldn't go to the library tonight. I pushed it to the back of my mind, and there it stayed, until last period, when I was putting away my notebook and my eyes fell on a library book in my bag. I bit my lip. It would go overdue tonight, and I was on a third strike. If this book went overdue, my library card would be suspended. What would I do if I couldn't check out books? My school doesn't have a library, and the only way I can fall asleep is to read until I can't keep my eyes open. It's okay, I decided. I'll just put it in the outside book return and go home. But they don't scan those books back into the system until tomorrow. It would be marked as overdue. I have to go in and scan it myself. What are the chances of running into that person, though? A quick run in and out. That's it. I walked to the library slowly. I entered with my book in hand and walked briskly to the book returns, keeping my head down. I got to the scanners and looked up. There were out-of-order signs posted, covering black screens with a little bit of blue static. I'm sorry, those are out of order. So are the ones on the second floor, actually, said someone from behind me. I turned to them slowly, afraid that at the least I would see round glasses looking back at me. But it was just the kind face of a librarian. If you want that book returned, you should head to the third floor. Those are the only ones working. Not even our handheld ones are working. They waved their unlit scanner around a bit. We aren't sure why, but we've got mechanics heading over. Thank you, I muttered, before turning to the stairs. Just go quickly, I thought to myself. In and out. I'm probably just being ridiculous anyways. I went up the stairs as fast as I could without looking suspicious, and I checked every aisle as I weaved my way through the silent floor to the book returns. It's strange. I always thought of the library as a safe place. I never felt afraid like I did at home or at school, but now I slipped around with the same amount of caution that I usually did. I scanned my book in and rejected the receipt. I felt better. I was just a little bit more relaxed, and I breathed a deep breath. letting out a soft sigh before turning to go. But something caught my eye. There was a hallway, lined with bookshelves on either side. I've never seen this hallway before, but that's impossible. I've been in every nook and cranny of this library. The silhouette's words suddenly came back to me, like it was being whispered in my mind, and I felt another chill. Find me where the pages must, and tomes have long collected dust. Where you've been, but do not know, that is where we lost things go. Hesitantly, I leaned in. I could smell the must of old books, and when I exhaled, small particles of dust came off the shelves. I looked down the hall and I saw a red door. It was barely 3 feet away. I took a hesitant step forwards, and another. A green book with gold trim caught my eye, and I stroked its spine before I continued, running my fingers in awe at the ornateness of the books. It took me a moment to realize that I should have reached the door already. I looked up at it, and it looked just as far as before. I looked behind me, and the books on the shelves faded into darkness. I looked up, and it was the same. I took a few steps back the way I came, and there was nothing. I looked back, and the door did not move. I felt panic take my system. I walked farther and looked back. The door did not move. I ran, and I ran into the darkness. I looked back. The door did not move.
Hello?
I screamed between gasps.
Help! I'm stuck. I don't know where I am. I'm lost.
The only response was my own breaths, and even those quieted as I heard behind me. The door clicked and creaked open. I turned slowly, and in the doorframe there was darkness. I looked back to the expansive bookshelves. They didn't end. I turned back to the door and approached it. This time I actually could. I touched the old doorknob, and after taking a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline pumping in my veins, I raised my fists, prepared to fight whatever was in this next room, and I entered. I walked into the dark and squinted as a light flooded my vision again. When my eyes adjusted, I was stunned. I was in a library, but not the one I know. I slowly walked in and spun to take it all in. The oval room had dark bookshelves, covered in books equally ornate as the ones outside. Again I looked up and the shelves faded away, but the darkness above me wasn't black. It was deep blue, and I could see swirls of stars connected by lines to make constellations. The hardwood gleamed under my feet. There was a slight step down to get to the rest of the room, and after it there was red carpet and soft-looking chairs with coffee tables and reading lamps. I took a deep breath, and the smell of old pages and coffee filled my nose. All of my fear from the hallway melted away. The awe and calm of this room took center stage.
I'm glad you could make it.
I spun around to face the voice, but all I faced was an empty reading chair. I looked around, but there was no one else in the room.
Where are you?
I asked.
Excuse me.
The voice chuckled from nowhere.
I'm right here.
I turned around again, and this time there was a figure, standing straight with a single hand resting on the back of one of the reading chairs. My mind felt dizzy and confused as I tried to take in the details of their figure. They were tall. I'm not sure how tall, but taller than me. They wore a long, dark blue trench coat and black combat boots. They had the hood of their coat up so their face was shrouded in shadow. Only a little bit of equally black hair stuck out, but their round, gold glasses were easily visible.
Why don't you take a seat?
They motioned to one of the reading chairs, and suddenly my legs were very tired. I glanced back at the figure and swung my backpack off of my shoulders before sitting down. It was blissful. The cushion was the softest I've ever felt, and I relaxed into the back, closing my eyes.
Michelle? Michelle?
I opened my eyes and realized that I was about to drift to sleep. Sitting up, I rubbed my eyes and sat up on the edge of my seat. Everything was telling me that it was fine, that I was safe, But a part of me was screaming that none of this was normal, and I shouldn't let my guard down. I promised I would answer your questions. They cocked their head at me, and although I couldn't see their face, it felt like they were smiling at me. Who are you? I don't have a name, but some people know me as the Tome Keeper, they replied. Oh, I'm sorry. Why do they call you that? They motioned around us in response. Because you collect books? I tried. The Tome Keeper stood up and walked to a shelf. Yes, but I don't just collect them. I make them. And sometimes, when I find the right soul, I gift them. They said as they pulled a book off of the shelf. They turned and held the book out to me. I took it curiously. It had beautiful binding. It was a blue like the sea, and my favorite stone was inlaid in the middle of the front cover, a gleaming labradorite circle. I moved to open it, but there was an elaborate clasp holding it shut. It's locked. Looking back into the void of the Tome Keeper's face. They were so close, but I still couldn't make out a single feature. Yes, and it will stay that way until you open yourself to it. And its contents. What's in it? I asked as the Tome Keeper sat in the chair across from me. Whatever you want. They replied, crossing their legs and leaning back into the chair. I make my books to be captivating to every reader. If you so choose, the story you read will never end. My books are the perfect escape. For every question the Tome Keeper answered, I became more and more confused. As I started to ask my next question, they pulled out a pocket watch and checked the time. Oh dear. They interrupted me, standing up briskly. It's late. Your library will be closing soon. But I just got here. I protested as the Tome Keeper pushed my bag back into my hands. Time passes differently in my room. I'm sorry I can't explain more, but come by any time and I will gladly answer your questions. We were at the red door now. I didn't even realize my feet moved. They opened it for me with a small flourish, and I felt the slight pressure of their other hand on my back as I stepped into the dark hallway with bookshelves on either side. But what? I cut off my words as I turned back to where I came from, but I was greeted by the beige wall and dead silence of the library on the third floor.
Thank you for visiting your public library. We will be closing in 5 minutes. Please check out all books before leaving,
said a voice over the speakers. I looked out a window and it was already dark. Looking down, I saw that I was still clutching the blue book. I tenderly placed it in my bag before walking downstairs and out of the library. I took a second when I walked into the cold night air to just breathe. I've never felt so disoriented in my life. I turned towards home. I didn't listen to a book or count cars or the streetlights I passed. My mind was too busy processing everything that just happened, even though the only conclusion I could bring myself to was that I was crazy. Every once in a while I would put my hand in my bag and run a finger down the spine of the blue book, just to reassure myself that it did happen, and I didn't hallucinate for 5 or more hours. I was still in this daze when I got home, when I unlocked the front door, and when I walked past the living room to the stairs. That's when I snapped out of it. That's when I became aware of every little detail. That's when I dropped my bag and looked up in horror at the figure of my father's limp body hanging off of the railing, held up by the neck with a belt. Motionless, stiff, cold. I looked up at his face, into his glazed eyes that were once alight with happiness, and looked at me with love. And I screamed. I sobbed and I ran up the stairs. I pulled at the belt, trying to get him down, as if somehow that would bring him back. But all I managed to do was make him sway, his limbs moving like a mannequin. I screamed for help, and I accidentally cut my hand on a shard of glass. Through my tears, I saw a mess made from the breakfast and lunch I made him. I choked on my sobs and went silent as I heard something fall on the downstairs floor. Slowly, I stood up and walked back downstairs, till the pill bottle was at my feet. I picked it up and I knew he didn't take any. I held it closer to my chest as more tears fell down my cheeks. I stifled soft sobs as I sank to my knees. This isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real, I repeated to myself in my mind. I would open my eyes and everything would be fine. I heard a noise like a lock opening, and I looked to where it came from. When I dropped my bag, everything came spilling out, all of my books and pens, and right next to me was the little blue book. The lock was open now, and I remembered the Tome Keeper's words. The perfect escape. A faint glow came from in between the pages. The perfect escape. I needed the perfect escape right now. With a shuddering breath, I reached out and opened the book. A blinding light shone from it, and ringing overtook my ears. When the light faded, I was on my back, looking up into a brilliant blue sky. I felt around me, and I was laying on sand. Where am I? Where was I?
Shelley!
I heard my dad call. I shot up in the sand. He exclaimed, scooping me up from the ground. I laughed and twisted to face him as he put me down. But something felt off.
Did you enjoy your ice cream, sweetheart?
He grinned, leaning down to my level. Ice cream? I don't remember having ice cream, but as I ran my tongue around my mouth, I could taste the lingering chocolate. Yeah, I did. I looked to my dad. He was smiling. He looked genuinely happy, especially in his swim trunks against the background of the beach. But why did I feel like that was wrong? Like this wasn't my dad?
Come on, kiddo.
He said, grabbing my hand.
Let's go look at the seals.
But that was ridiculous. Of course this was my dad, I thought, running into the water with him. Who else could it be? No, this was my dad, and this, living with him on the beach, it was bliss. I smiled as we floated together in the light waters. Bits of sand that looked like stars swirled around us, left in the trail, and we stayed there, with seals dancing around us, never needing to come up for air. A dark figure walked in a front door and down a hall. They stopped at the stairs, where the body of a man hung from the railing, and they retrieved a little blue book from the limp but warm hands of a girl with long black hair. Stepping over her body, the figure pulled out a key and locked the book's clasp, their boots crunching a pill or two from the open bottle lying in the girl's other hand. The figure took one last look at the scene before them, before walking through a red door that had never been in that house before, and would likely never return there.